Kat Walsh. Welcome to Safe Space with Kira Graves.
Thank you so much, Kira. I am so excited and honored to be here.
This is so exciting because I don't know if my audience knows this, but Kat's podcast, Life with Kat, was literally my inspiration for this podcast. So it's pretty fucking exciting. And I also love Trip on This, which I found like a year ago. For some reason, I just stumbled upon it. It was like on Spotify, it popped up, and I was like, a psychedelic podcast? What is this? And immediately it grabbed my attention. And I've listened to so many of your episodes. You're amazing. You're a goddess. Like you are
Thank you.
really advocating for the right stuff in society right now.
I appreciate it. Honestly, even when you had mentioned like you starting your own podcast because of mine, I feel like that's the piece. I actually have like a title of an episode called "We Are All Lighthouses" or something like that, and I haven't recorded it. Maybe I was never meant to because I'm just going to talk about it here. But basically, that like you know, by just sharing in like my own truth, right, with Life with Kat and my own journey, and not coming from a place of like knowing, but just kind of being like I'm figuring it out. That I'm going to find whoever I'm meant to find, and then it then is that kind of permission that gives other people, like let's say the people I connect with, like yourself, then you go out and go like, okay, like how do I show up in my life and touch all the people in my community? And then the people that listen to your podcast, they do it. And I feel like that's how the world changes ultimately, is just by each of us in our own little sliver of the world, just doing our thing and just being like, we're just doing our best and figuring it out. And then we each do that. And then, yeah, miracles can happen.
It's a domino effect. Exactly. Like that's always been my mission, like having social media and, putting my voice out there in terms of like the queer community. It started with that and now it's, spirituality, mental health, but like whatever you can whatever you can do to just share your light, just fucking do it, man.
Yeah.
Like do it and people will find you. Like things will fall into place and they always are.
It's so true. I feel like we can all teach each other something. And so I think everybody listening can take something from that. Like you never know how you're going to touch somebody's life, save somebody's life. You really don't know, like within your own story.
Yeah, it could literally just be like one TikTok and like someone saw that one TikTok and now like their whole perspective has changed. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about like your spiritual journey because this podcast is all about kind of my spiritual journey and my guest spiritual journey and just like what we're learning on this crazy earth school. So, can you tell me about how you started on your spiritual path of awakening?
Totally. I mean, the thing is, I would say like, I guess we're all on it, right? For a lifetime. When it consciously kicks in though, I think is probably that kind of like that second piece. Because, as I like reflect back at my life, I realized like everything was always setting me up for this now moment, right? But I would say that my journey really began with an ayahuasca journey that I did in 2018. At that time where I was in my life I was just completely disenchanted with life. Like I was working at a job that I was both stressed and bored at. And I was always under such pressure. And I always put a ton of pressure on myself. Like I came from very like cool jobs. I worked at a large talent agency. I worked at ESPN. And then this time I was now working and overseeing like big networks. And so by all like societal, what's great, like you're doing it right. I should have been, right? Like I've got a very cool job that's supposedly desirable. And yet like I just wasn't passionate about it. Like it had its moments, and I was learning a lot, but I I somehow deep in my soul knew that like this was like, I started to ask the question, like, is this it? Is this all we're doing out here? Like if this is it, like it was almost dawning on me that I'm like, uh-oh, like I'm about to go into an existential crisis. If like, this is all I do is I wake up, I get stressed, I go to work and I maybe live for the weekends and high moments. It didn't feel right. And so I started to ask the question that led me to ayahuasca. And I basically came to her on my hands and knees. And I was ready for it to be as hard as it needed to be, by the way. And I just said, like, please put me on the path of what I'm meant to be doing, what I'm meant to be experiencing in this life. Cause I have no idea. And that experience for me ultimately was a journey about self-love. And during the experience, it didn't feel like that. Like it was just the whole, I won't even get into a whole other conversation, but it was really the next day that I really understood, as I was kind of going through this integration process. I just wrote in the sand, I love you. And I remember this experiential understanding that my lesson plan in this life was about self-love and what that meant, and realizing like, how could I understand my purpose um, without ever even like looking at myself and what I was capable of fully. Like, how could I, to be a real like creator and to step into our, full radiance and what we came here to be, like, how could I be doing that if I was just like dishonoring myself, like left, right, and center through overworking and allowing bad behavior, just lots of different things, right? And so in all of 2019, basically, I was on this self-love, like, what does that mean for me? And that looked like a lot of things, like bubble baths and crying and journaling and starting to like kind of get into my spiritual books, but I wouldn't say spiritual awakening yet. Uh, Bubble baths. I went off dating websites, and I then finally, a friend of mine had this show that he created, and it was made from mushrooms and ecstasy. Okay. And it was this third time I'd ever had mushrooms. And I was like, the first two times I was like, first time was terrifying. And the second time was just like a lot. But the third time I was kind of like ready. And so I was like, okay. And there was like 6 of us, and it was the most, can I curse on here?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. It was the most
Please
amazing
do.
fucking time I've ever had in my life. Like that night, I have never felt awe and wonder and bliss and just the extraordinary amount of joy that I felt that night. I had never experienced ever in my life. I didn't even know I had the capacity to feel it. And so that, for one, just like I knew, I was like, well, I'm forever changed after this night, forever. And then I was very fortunate that his friends, like he just kept kind of adding to things. So for that next, I would say about 8 or 9 months in total, I was watching the show probably at least 2 times a month, but like all weekend long. We would just be there, like watch hours and hours, because we'd stop and we'd chat. And I was also tripping the whole, like all that time. I was doing a ton of mushrooms at this time, not understanding that mushrooms, what they're actually doing besides having like an extraordinarily amazing time, it's basically a snow day for the brain. And so I was also imprinting my nervous system with all of these new emotions: love, bliss, community, fun, joy, like how amazing it felt to be alive. I had never felt that. And it was changing me. It was changing me, and it was changing me rapidly. I always say to people, like, look, I can't ever, as somebody with a psychedelic podcast, can't ever recommend how much I was tripping, but like it was a lot for an 8-month period, like a couple times a month, but like all weekend long. So like 3 days in a row, like so many mushrooms. But what that was doing is it was putting me on this super highway of like my own evolution. I just remember like telling my folks, I'd come over and be like, I am experiencing leaps and bounds in my understanding of myself, my revelations I was having about myself, like really so many tears. I'd just be like unpacking after these weekends of just stuff that was falling off of me, and like memories coming up that I needed to look at and cry for and move through and dance through and pray through and all of these different things. And finally I had it was October 24th, it's coming up, 2020. I had a mystical spontaneous awakening. So what I want to say is my spiritual awakening really began, I would say, like in that time, but my conscious connection to spirit came on October 24th, 2020. And I knew it was going to be different that night. I knew it. I had been doing Tantra. I was feeling so magnetic, Kira. Like your girl was fucking feeling herself at this point. Like I was I knew I was going to be making trip on this. I had came up with like, I kind of skipped past that part, but just know for your listeners, like suddenly I started to think entrepreneurial about myself. I started to see myself and what I was capable of in a way that I had never in my life experienced. I had never even believed I was entrepreneurial, let alone somebody who's going to go out and start a podcast and think I'm going to make it overnight and like do this for a living and not knowing, having a game plan. Like it was just so like, it was a crazy ride. But just to kind of stay on track of like the spiritual aspect, just because I want to be mindful of our time, is I do this tantra before, and I asked the intention that night, and I said, I had another friend that was like extremely psychic, extremely witchy and awesome, and like very, very gifted, and always had been. And I remember I was like gone through this tantra thing, and then I always connected to an intention right after, like when you've got all that life force energy, like our pleasure and our orgasms are so connected actually to like visionary states. It's like like pro tip, like if you're gonna have an orgasm, like right when it's happening, like think about something that you really want to like call into your life.
When you made that episode on that, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And now I've
Totally.
been doing it more. Like when you're coming, just thinking about like the best like future vision for yourself.
Absolutely. Or like maybe you're having this amazing orgasm, but like the view in the background is just like this epic ocean with like a palm tree. And you're just like, oh, I'm somewhere bomb right now. Clearly having this amazing moment, like, you know, like
That
somewhere
is powerful.
where I'd like to be. I don't know.
That is so powerful.
But yeah. And so I said, I was like, I'm ready to be like, step into my power like so and so. I won't say her name. And I could feel my whole spirit being like, skirt, no. It's like, try again. I was like, and I understood it in a second. And I was like, I'm ready to step into the power that I'm meant to, my power, not like anyone else, like whatever my gifts are for this life. And then that night, I end up having a spontaneous mystical awakening at this show that we were all going to. And I would say like the intuitive funnel voice to like what I call like my guides and my ancestors and my angels and my higher self, like came online in a way that was so otherworldly and continues to be so different than like just the thinking mind, because the thinking mind was there trying to figure out like what was going on. And from that day forward, the voice, that intuitive voice of like the heart, right? Because I feel like it's the smaller, the quieter voice than the mind.
Yeah,
Was
it is for
so
sure.
has guided me ever since through, and has guided me through some very, very scary moments. And I know because you've listened to the podcast, like moments where I was like, I have no money in the bank. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I like very extreme circumstances where I just kept getting the message, you're going to have everything that you need. And just moving through that and being like, this is so crazy. Like if anybody understood, and then a miracle would happen. I would start laughing because I'm like, this is insane. And then I just would keep going. And then like, boom, a $10,000 check comes in from that where I could have never, and it was my wildest dreams ever expected. And like multiple scenarios where if I had gotten in the way of the message, I would have taken myself out of what is now becoming, what has already been a dream, but now this year has just begun to blossom in a way that like I knew always existed, but it's still pretty cool for the mind.
Oh, I literally have chills right now. Like if you could see like my arm, the hair is standing up on my arms. Like, wow. That that is so powerful. Like thank you so much for sharing that. I think that your story is really also relatable to a lot of people, especially how you started out. Like you were in a corporate job, you were living the life that the American dream or whatever it is, right? Like
Yeah.
what everyone strives, they strive to have this like perfect job, perfect house, you know. They're making the money that they want to be making, but still something is off. And I feel like so many people have that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I wanted to say was that I love how plant medicines started you on this journey because honestly, I think I like have a similar situation where like in 2018, 2019, I was on the self-love journey, but didn't connect yet, like
Mm-hmm.
really strongly
Mm-hmm.
until I started actually smoking more cannabis.
Yeah.
And, I know that like a lot of people have different experiences with cannabis, but with me, it was like that was my almost plant medicine to be like, all right, like my intuition started speaking so much more loud and I heard it and I really like acknowledged it and all these fears and things started popping up and I had to just deal with I had to look at it all. I
Yeah.
had to look at like the dark parts of me and I feel like um mushrooms also that's similar in a similar way like it brings up uh some repressed
Stuff.
stuff. Yeah. I am so happy for you. Like,
Thank you.
because you know what? That is hard to do. It is
Yeah,
hard to,
it's been a thing.
yeah, like it is hard to have that much faith and trust that like things will work out because I think that the money aspect in particular really gets in the way of a lot of people's like dreams and goals because they're worrying so much about the money. Like if they have no money, they go back into survival mode and then, that like spiritual self is sometimes cut off.
Yep.
So like good for you for sticking with it. Like, whew.
It's I created Life with Cat Walsh in many ways to kind of help pave a roadmap for that journey. And there's no guarantees around like what happens, but I guess having such a strong hunch that like wherever I'm going to go, it's going to be awesome, and to be able to document all the, I guess you could say like high risk, high reward, right? In a lot of ways. However, I don't know that everybody needs to be like as extreme as me. And in a way, I feel like my lesson plan in this life was to get on the edge of what trust and faith looks like, so that I could speak about it from a very not from a comfy place, but actually from the place of I literally I don't have a family that came from money, that, you know what I mean? Like there was so much lack and scarcity that I needed to work through and continue to work through, though it's definitely there's been a really, really big shift for me this year. But I want to say to people, like it took, 2.5 years, close to 3 years, in order to really understand that I'm the brand. I know how to make money. I can always make money, and that I can ask, and I can make money doing what I love to do. I loved your episode actually about making money recently. That was
Thank
great. I thought
you.
I took some very, very lots of helpful things away from that too.
Thank you.
Really good. And what I want to say about mushrooms, actually, I love what you said about cannabis. And the thing is like, I always say to people, like, find your molecule, right? Because it's not going to be mushrooms for everybody. Some people it's going to be MDMA.
Right.
Test it though, because MDMA can get cut with a lot of stuff. But
Yeah.
cannabis, mushrooms, LSD, like ayahuasca, right? There's so many. Bufo is 5-MeO DMT. Some people are just very drawn to that. It's been the game changer for them. But the way that I began my healing journey actually was through joy, an outrageous amount of joy.
Totally.
That was my path through, was getting to understand how wonderful it is to be alive. And then once I developed my relationship with mushrooms, then we backed into the crunchy, shadowy, fearful stuff.
Yeah.
But my introduction and set and setting, which is your mindset and the setting which you take do it. So many people are doing mushrooms, right, in a very therapeutic, eyes closed. They go into with this idea it's going to be hard, it's going to be work, it's going to be this. Well, it's going to mirror. Not always. It could be quite beautiful. You can go in, but it's going to be very therapeutic in that context. Where in the context that I was doing it in was, in quotes, recreational, yet not at all, right? Like in terms of what it was actually doing for my life. And the truth is, recreation, we say that like as if this is like that we have to just struggle. And I think I've recently started working with people as like kind of like a trip companion, I like to say, like
Cool.
basically like I don't like to use the word trip sitter or guide, because my approach to sitting with people is different. And I approach it through the lens of like fun and joy. and like a choose your own adventure, where it's the cultivation of your own, like trusting yourself, because ultimately that's what I want for everyone, is to be able to trust themselves, because it gets very confusing when you start asking everybody for advice, especially when you know the answer already. So yeah, I just wanted to go off on that little tangent about how plant medicines don't necessarily have to be hard. You might set the intention to have a fun day and it still ends up being challenging.
Yeah.
But it's like, you just got to trust it's what you need.
I find that too. Like I started smoking cannabis and it was really fun, and I would do it with my partner at night, and we would just have these like deep talks and go on walks and like just jump around, skip around, dance, and it started with the joy. Exactly. And then like soon it started to go more into like, oh, this is work now. But I also think that it's whatever you're meant to experience, right? It's like, because I always smoke with an intention too, like or ingest the cannabis, or with mushrooms too. Like I'll have an intention, and more often than not, like it does help. But sometimes it's just like out of your hands. Like the universe needs you to learn something and you're gonna learn it. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I just want to let go. Like my intention is to let go. And you're thinking in your head like, oh, like I'm gonna feel so free and loose. But then like what the universe interprets it as like, oh, you want to let go of something.
Okay. You want to let go of stuff. Yeah, okay. Here's something to let go of.
Yeah.
Something you don't want to think about for a while.
Yeah, like a childhood trauma. You're like,
yeah, exactly. You basically should have said, you want to relax?
Yes. You have to be so specific.
Very specific.
So I'm really curious to know your opinion on this. So I live in Toronto, Canada, and there's been a lot of mushroom stores opening up around the city, like crazy fast in the past, I would say year. Like a year ago, there was just one. And now it's like there's almost as many as like cannabis stores now.
Really?
Okay, maybe not. Maybe not that crazy. But like close. I feel like it's getting there. Like it seems like it's getting there. And I think this is really good in a way because, it's I don't know the like legalities of it, but I do know that it's decriminalized. So, people are able to sell it, and like there's, larger companies that are providing their mushrooms to these stores. But I do have a little bit of worry surrounding it because I feel like the education is not there yet for mushrooms, and I feel like these are substances that you have to really respect. Why is it important to have proper education around mushrooms before consuming them? And what do you think of the increasing, like the rapid growth?
Yeah, these are both really good questions. So I had been hearing that about Canada. It's decriminalized. That's not legalized, and that's why a couple of those shops actually had been shut down. And I think actually I just saw like yesterday, 2 days ago, another store. I don't know if it was in Toronto or Vancouver,
Montreal.
Maybe it was just shut down again. So one of them, it got raided. So they're not in the clear. They're kind of operating in plain sight. But yeah, it's not, they're not in a legal now, but just let's now imagine they are legal though, right? Because that's what you're basically saying is it's becoming very, very accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is I've been thinking about that question a lot too, because in California, there's actually an initiative right now called the psilocybin initiative, California bill or whatever. And essentially it would legalize the sale, distribution, gifting, the cultivation of magic mushrooms in California. You would get a tax ID number and it would be considered recreational. You don't need a license. Ultimately, I'm supportive, right? Like ultimately I'm supportive of the government not gatekeeping something like mushrooms, especially when people are just going to do it. However, that means that there needs to be a major, major push around education around these things, because for me, it's always been around education over regulation, because the truth is we know that the war on drugs, for instance, hasn't worked. People are going to be hearing about mushrooms. They know they work. They're going to get them.
Yep.
Are they going to get them from whoever they can in the shadows? Could it be sketchy? They don't know. Or can they get it from something more reputable, brands that they know of? They, that like is more, people have had them, right? It takes anytime you take anything out of the shadows and into the light, there's harm reduction. Okay. So that's like an automatic, like harm reduction can happen because people aren't afraid of being incriminated.
Right.
If they do need help, right? If they do need assistance, if they do are having kind of a psychosis, a really, really, really difficult time, these are extremely powerful substances.
Mm-hmm.
They grow from the earth. So to me, they are the earth's gift to us and not meant to be regulated, but they are meant to be learned about and respected. And starting very slow is very, very important for people. I personally just had an ego death experience for the first time, and I'm not going to lie, it was straight up terrifying. I didn't even know what I was experiencing. I just thought I was losing my mind. And really what I didn't realize is because I was well, I won't get into that, but it was such a crazy story. I think I'm going to make a video about it at some point.
Please do.
But like there was a part of me that was like witness to the whole experience, but I was basically losing all grip about like who I was and what I was. Now, mind you, I did like a heroic dose of mushrooms. It was like close to 7 grams. And that's well over a hero's dose. But the thing is, like, people need to understand that like there's going to be people for sure that probably end up in emergency because they think something's going wrong. Now, the good news is that they're not fatal. Mushrooms, there's as far as we know, there's no fatal dose of mushrooms. Mm-hmm. I also ultimately believe that people should have the opportunity to learn the hard way and make mistakes if they're not hurting anyone else, right? It's the same thing with alcohol to me, and the same thing with cannabis, right? Mm-hmm. If you drink too much, alcohol is quite literally fatal in large doses, right? We know that I can go to my local, any store here in California. There's no limits here. So right. I can literally go anywhere and get 10 fifths of vodka and drink myself to death tonight. I'm not going to, but like it's there. Now, we're not going to say alcohol should therefore be illegal for everyone because of the abuse of alcohol, right? And the abuse of alcohol is quite heavy. We also know that alcohol has like so much money invested in it. Alcohol's not going anywhere anytime soon because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is everywhere. And so the way that I like to talk about it with people is it's like educate, more podcasts, more resources. If you do have an operating shop, for instance, I think there should be, before you go, here is a list of really good setting dosages, things you need to know before you embark. And I think that that's something that's easily done. You know what I mean? Here's a list of podcasts that we really love. Yeah. Here's a list of, there's people making like how to, and the more that YouTube and places like that can stop censoring psychedelics and allow for information so people can ultimately learn. Yeah. Because right now, like, the more you censor, the more people have to figure it out for themselves. And then the more, bad trips can happen. And so the more that you actually allow people to just empower people as the sovereign people they are to make the decision that they want, to know that it might be the scariest day of your life or the best. You got to know before you go in and take an eighth of mushrooms that it can go every which way. Yeah. And so, I mean, for me, what would be in a perfect world to me, those shops that you're talking about have a major educational component to it. Mm-hmm. Lists of things to listen to, watch, because the truth is, I think most people, they want to know how to set themselves up for success. Mm-hmm. They want to know, are there going to be people that do stupid shit? Of course, there's people eating Tide Pods. We can't help everyone. We can't help if people are eating Tide Pods. Like, what the hell? Like, there's going to be those people too. Yeah. And so I think to me, it's like speaking to that, the majority of people who want to make sure that they set themselves up for success. And ultimately, they might learn the hard way and have a really uncomfortable experience for 6 hours. And they're going to be all right, ultimately, physically. And then you learn. Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And also, sorry, one more piece is about really understanding mental health. that should be the other big piece, is if you have schizophrenia in your family, I wouldn't just like throw yourself into a big mushroom experience, because it has been known that if you do have like very severe bipolar in your family, but schizophrenia is the biggest one. If you've got that in your family, to not just be willy-nilly about this, because it can set basically become a trigger to become schizophrenia if that already runs in the family. So it doesn't come without its you know, precautions, if you
Right.
will. But again, educate, and then
Yeah.
ultimately let the people decide for themselves.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
where I'm at with that.
I love that. I love everything you just said. I agree. I think that they do need to have, like, right when you walk into the store, like, you know, whether it's a pamphlet or a little film that they're playing on the screen or whatever, because I feel like even just the people that work at the mushroom stores, like, I don't know, like, they haven't seemed super educational about it. They're just like, yeah, this one's like, you know, this one will really make you trip. Here's some microdosing caplets. Like yeah, it's still like, I feel like even we need like the people that work in the stores to be super like experienced and educated. But it is at the end of the day, it's like, choose your own journey. People are going to be silly and do silly things regardless of mushrooms, regardless of anything. They're going to just be silly.
Yeah. It's like common sense. It's like inviting people to have like common sense with things. You know, if you've never done LSD before, maybe going to Burning Man for the first time and trying a full dose is not the most, it works out for a lot of people, but oftentimes it doesn't. That's why the Zeno Project has an entire tent for people having a very difficult time on psychedelics. And it's like, would you try anything for the first time that you don't know how it's going to affect your body in a place that you're around also 70,000 people, or any festival for that matter? It's like, go to the park one day, go to the beach and have a trip with your friends, know how it feels in your body first. It's like, simple stuff. And also start small. You can always add, you can't
exactly.
You can always add. Straight up. And once you start getting more comfortable, then you could start getting into those bigger experiences. And they're like trip sitters, trip guides. The more, if you bring it legal, then you could be like, here's a list of people that sit with you, that can if you are having an ego death and you think everything is going wrong, that they can sit with you and go, what you're feeling is normal. You're not, and your brain, you will come back. And what you're experiencing is an ego death. Just knowing that, oh, okay, people experiencing this, I'm not actually going crazy right now. You're like, nope.
I feel like a lot of people listening are going to be really interested in like how they can, you know, how they can start on this journey, because it's also like there's been studies about how mushrooms and even like just microdosing can really help your mental health, like because that's also what we're dealing with is like, you know, a mental health crisis. Like everyone is struggling right now. And yeah, just thinking about like how mushrooms can help certain people along their path to like feel better. With me, like I haven't really talked about mushrooms much on my podcast yet, but I do microdose. I mainly microdose. And I have been for probably about a year now. I haven't really gotten into the like really big doses yet because I just don't feel like I'm ready for that yet. And that's okay. Like, I think that you can start microdosing, like, if you're interested, right? Like, start microdosing, make sure you know where it's coming from, of course. Like, make sure you know the dosage. And start doing that. Like, I want to know, Kat, like, do you have a microdosing experience? Like, did you start with microdosing, or like, what's your relationship to that?
Not only did psychedelics change my life and change the life of so many people I talk to, like life saving on all different dosages. And I'll come back to your question. I also think psychedelics, you know, people always just say, they use the word like, it's not a panacea, which means like catch all. And no, of course not. Of course, it's not going to be like this solve for everything, but I do think it is going to be a massive game changer, not just for mental health, but also mental wellness and feeling excellent and feeling connected to our gratitude and our purpose and our love and our joy and why we're here in the first place. The reason why I think they're going to do that is because it connects us back to ourself. And so you don't need a lot to start being connected back to the inner voice, right? if there's one thing I can say for everyone, it's actually cultivating the relationship with intuitive voice within you. And mushrooms, psychedelics have a knack for helping with that.
Totally.
Cannabis, like you were saying, it has a knack for aligning you. So oftentimes, no, I didn't start with microdoses. I started with bigger doses. I have certainly done protocols. I like to, when I go out like socially, I don't drink anymore. So I'll have like point, you know, 0.3 of like a chocolate or something, like, which is like a large microdose. I would consider it more of like a small recreational dose because I can feel it. You're not supposed to actually feel a microdose really. But that feels good because like I'm myself, I'm cat, my feet are on the ground, but everything's a little more sparkly. I'm a little more fluid. I'm laughing a little easier. I'm social. I'm able to freely dance. Like it kind of allows that self-conscious part of myself to go to bed a little bit.
Totally.
And I think that's a really lovely place for people to start because you begin to build your own relationship with the mushrooms, even figuring out what is the right microdose for you. What's a working microdose? Like when you're going to work or you wanting to do something productive, it might need to be like 100 milligrams or 0.1 or even 0.50 or like 50 milligrams, which is a teeny tiny microdose. That might be perfect for you to go through what you want to do. Or some people just need more. So it might be like 0.25. And that's a heavier microdose. And there's an exploratory phase, even with the microdoses. It's a little bit of a gateway in the way that like when the call comes, now that once you get comfortable with whatever it is that you're microdosing, then you'll get the hit. The reason why you haven't been ready for a big dose is because it hasn't called you yet. And it will. If you're meant to have it. You might not be. You might already be on the right track. I would say like those big doses are like for realignment, like big shifts, where microdoses are like little like you go to like the chiropractor and it's just kind of like putting some like cracking a few things back into place a little bit, like okay, but it's not a big like you're going to something's way out of whack here with your body, you know.
Totally.
I find that when I'm microdosing, things that are not in alignment become very obvious to me. And then I need to make some choices. So it, unlike Xanax or a SSRI, that just kind of, it doesn't need your participation to work. A microdose does, actually. This is a two-way street between you and the mushroom. And it's going to start to serve up sometimes just waves of gratitude and love and like, damn, it feels really happy to be here, you know? And then it also serves up sometimes a little bit of sadness, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of suddenly, you know, a friend maybe that you know that it hasn't been good or whatever it is, it's been out of alignment for you. It becomes in your face a little bit. It just loudly shows you that something in this is not in alignment for you. And what a gift that is. Most people walk through their life with so much shit out of alignment that they're not even recognizing, oh, every time I'm around this person, I'm drained. I feel like shit. They make me anxious. That's not in alignment.
Yeah. They're not like conscious in their lives. Yeah. And it's such a blessing to have those realizations. Oh.
And you don't need mushrooms, right? It's like how you actually, I think the whole spiritual game is a self-awareness game.
Yeah.
It's just like, are you aware of how you feel? Look, even if you love your job, there's still days that there's resistance.
Yeah.
But are you being very honest with yourself around like, if you absolutely hate everything about going to your job, your work, scares you, drains you, takes the spirit out of you, like it needs to be addressed by you at some point. And I feel like the soul does not allow us to kick things down the road or underneath the bed forever. And so instead of an earthquake shaking us, like allow a little aftershock to be the thing. If you know the truth for yourself and then something kind of like really like kind of disconcerting happens, don't wait until the moment where you're Then suddenly it's like down the road, you're stuck, and then you're fired. And it's like this whole big blow up. And it didn't have to be that way.
Right. If you can like catch things in advance, right? Like catch the little misalignments, the little things that feel off, like pay attention to those, right? Like,
Yeah. I think that's how you can like navigate not having such big disasters. Not to say things will happen, but usually when something major happens, we always kind of knew something had to give before that point.
totally. So, if you could give any advice to a first time psilocybin mushroom user, what would you say to them?
Yeah, totally. I'd want them to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So just like get clear on what their intentions are and what their expectations are, and allow the process of like letting that go. I can promise that whatever you think a mushroom trip is going to be, it's not that. It never ever lines up to what you think. There's no way to conceptualize what it's going to be like if you've never had it, right? So allowing the process of knowing what your intention is, even if it's pure curiosity, allowing if there's judgment behind the truth of your intention, to like work through all of those things so that you're going in and allowing like the truth of why you're going in to be there and being okay with it. Because there's nothing wrong with being like, I just curious. Great.
Absolutely. Good.
Absolutely. You're just curious, go for it. You know, as long as you're not pretending like it's something else, because that's you're out of alignment with yourself again. So it's like getting into alignment with yourself first is super important. Of course, dosages, right? What type of experience are you looking for? You want just a little sparkle? You want to just feel how it feels in your body? Or you want to go on a trip? So then talk to them about dosages and saying like, it's obviously person dependent, but like if you want a trip, would I recommend for people generally? Okay, let me not say recommend, but like when I talk to them, when I invite, I always say like, does that feel good to you though? I was like, check in with yourself when I say this number and tell me, does that feel right for you? And if you get a no or a yes, you have to just tell me, because that's also that's the conversation. It's about trusting yourself. But like a gram and a half, which is about like half an eighth, technically it's 1.7, but is to me like right when you start getting into like a psychedelic style trip, where you're not like in your full classical trip, you can still, people can have a very big experience on a gram and a half. People can have a very big experience on a gram.
Even on a microdose.
Yeah. But and so it's like, it's always tough because like every body is different.
So different.
But if you know that you're going in for a trip, it's a little bit, the nice thing is it's like there's no surprise element to it. So even if it's like a gram to a gram and a half, right? Or higher, if people go that route, if you know you're going in for a trip, at least your mind isn't like, wait a minute, I was supposed to be microdosing, I'm feeling too much, right? That's when we panic a little bit. So starting small based on like what type of experience they want to have, and then just kind of just letting whatever happens be exactly what was always meant to be. Like then just go in and say like, if this is a yes for you and you feel that yes, even if you're a little scared, know that this was always for you, and just like open up now and receive whatever you're meant to receive in those moments.
Yeah, beautiful. Well said. And do you recommend people to, like, especially for their first time, to do it with someone else? And is there like a specific like location that you think would be best for them? Like what can you recommend?
Yeah, no, great questions. Yeah, I would definitely recommend if you're having a trip, you know, like not if you're microdosing, right? Like you don't have to, I mean, I wouldn't tell someone like you have to sit a microdose, you shouldn't feel, right? Like you should basically not feel it. And if you're doing like something just a little bit above a microdose, have somebody, I would say it's nice to have a friend for, I think for like that, for a micro, just like, you know, like a little micro or even if it's a little bit above a micro. So we're talking like under a gram, right? Like way under, like under even 0.5. If you're choosing to do it alone on those, even like that kind of like a small or like a large micro, small recreational, have a friend you can call, take down there's a psychedelic hotline called Fireside. I want to say it's called 82 Fireside. You just spell it out. And you can also look it up if you're listening to this. You could put it in your phone now. They're open from 11 to 11 every single day. And if you're just like, I took zero point 0.4 of a mushroom and I feel like I'm resisting it a lot, you can have someone to talk to.
Cool.
But if you're going for a big journey, definitely be with someone who's done this before, who's experienced, and that you feel comfortable with. Like that you can feel that you feel comfortable to cry in front of, that you can feel comfortable to be silly in front of, right? Whether that's a stranger for some people, right? If they don't have any friends, where it's almost easier to cry and be goofy with someone that they might not see again, or with a really close friend that has done it. Again, like I can't stress enough how important it is for someone to just say what you're feeling is normal. That immediate relief is sometimes all you need. The only thing that really starts to screw with us during a trip is when we think that we are uniquely something's going wrong. That's just the mind. The ego part of ourself, the mind that's in control, is losing its grip of control. It's actually going to sleep when you do it, and it's allowing this other expansive part of you to take hold. But that part of us, if you're a very controlling person, it might not. It sometimes doesn't want to go without a fight. So just knowing that that's very normal in the process, and that you could just breathe through it and keep telling that part of yourself that it's safe. I'm safe. I took a mushroom. I know I'm going to be fine, and it's going to be okay. And like, I wanted this, reminding yourself like, oh yeah, I wanted this experience, like whatever it was going to be helps. So, and then location, I personally love to be outside, but you want to be by a place that's like, if you have a backyard, for instance, or at least by a bathroom. You want to be able to like, I pee a lot when I'm tripping, and I drink a lot of water.
I also poop.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I'll like get nervous.
Oh
and then
my God,
I'll have to run to the bathroom.
Totally. So normal. And also I want to say, like, if you're taking big doses, like nausea, vomiting, pooping, these are all part of this can very much just be part of the process. And to think of it like a purge, that you don't need it. You know, the less resistance we have to, oh, I feel nauseous. Am I going to throw up? If you do, okay, cool, great, get it out. You know, like get it out. Like it's not for you. And the more that you can be like, I allow this nausea to be here because I know it's just like, it's like spring clean for my soul right now. And it's just clearing out some dense energy on me that I don't need. And by being less afraid of it and welcoming it, oftentimes it like dissipates it.
Yeah, I like that perspective because me specifically, like I've had a phobia of vomiting.
Oh, that's right.
So I think that's another reason maybe why I haven't done like a larger dose, because I'm like, oh my God, like what if I throw up? Like it causes a lot of anxiety, and like I almost like won't let myself throw up. But I think that like if I were to do a really large dose, like I would just have to let it happen. Like it would just effortlessly happen. And just knowing that it's not scary, it is like a way of your body being like, all right, let's flush some stuff out. Like no big deal.
The thing is, there's things that you can do to help that, right? So, like making a tea, for instance, helps with nausea, because you're not actually throwing up. It's not that you won't. It's not that you won't have nausea, but like oftentimes it helps because you're not drinking the cellulose of the actual mushroom. That is the thing that's making you nauseous. So when you make a tea, you're really, really helping your stomach process that. So you're just drinking it pure. So if you are doing really any like doses over like 1 gram and you're very worried about nausea, making a tea is definitely helpful.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
It's definitely helpful. And a lot of times nausea comes in waves. So you might just, especially if there's just lots of activity, you just might get like, it's just an influx of energy. And so it's kind of like you need to be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling a little queasy, a little nauseous, but it's not necessarily like I'm going to throw up. Some people do, right? Some people do. I've never personally actually thrown up on mushrooms.
Okay.
I've gotten nauseous on mushrooms for sure. And it's not gonna lie, it's not fun. But oftentimes it moves.
It'll pass.
Yeah. And I also watch when I'm getting nauseous. I think I mentioned this.
Yes. In an episode or a TikTok or something.
Yeah. So if you're like cruising, you're doing great. And like, let's say like work comes up or something. And you suddenly start thinking about, oh my gosh, you have so much to do on Monday. And then suddenly you start getting nauseous. instead of just being like, oh, right, I had mushrooms or I'm just nauseous. Now I'm just nauseous, but actually connecting it back to, oh, but what thoughts oftentimes our emotional body is connected to nausea that comes in. It's nausea is another way of communicating with us. One last little story about that is I remember I went on a walk. I was feeling great. And this is kind of like coming down from my experience. I was like good on my feet. I was with a couple people and we were walking and I was feeling so good. And all of a sudden I get this wave of crazy nausea. And I was like, whoa. And I walk past this car and it's this shiny, sleek car. And I see that there's two guys in it. And I see one of them and it was just dark, girl. Like I see them look behind themselves and they don't see me at all. And like they're doing something. And I was like, everything about them was, I was like, dangerous, dark, like it was so off-putting. And the minute I saw them and I registered, oh, I'm picking up on their energy. I'm picking up on something that's, when we think about those, there's astral realms, like, and things that like, I can't see it, but it's
You can
there
feel
and
it.
it's felt. The minute I brought awareness to the situation, immediately the nausea went. It was like, because it was through being conscious of, ooh, that's weird. Why? That's okay. And then connecting dots, I learn and then it passes.
Yeah.
Nausea, I learn about something, it passes. So it's, if you look at it as almost like a way to navigate, it's another way of communication to you.
Yeah, your body's communicating to you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's happened to me with, smoking weed, right? Like I'll see someone on the street or like I'll make eye contact with them and I'm very empathetic and like I can really like soak in people's energy quickly, which is like a superpower, but it's also like you got to like be able to harness it properly. Yeah, like sometimes I'll just make eye contact with someone and be like, "Oh, suddenly I'm in a dark headspace." But just being as conscious as you can and catching that when it happens, I guess.
And not internalizing it like it's your own.
Just being like, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. We're good. We're good. Just bring a little love and light to yourself. A little, I don't know. I'm safe in my body and I'm safe energetically. I'm safe. It just invites that, like, right. I got my guides, my angels, protected always.
Yeah.
Just that reminder is just helpful to keep telling ourselves.
Yeah. Say some affirmations to yourself. That's what I do too.
Yeah.
All right, I see that we have 4 minutes left. We got so much good like information and insight. Thank you so much for like sharing everything that you know and your own experiences. Like this has been so much fun to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kira. No, this was great. Hopefully it was a little bit helpful. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on. Spirituality and psychedelics are like my two favorite things to talk about because they're intertwined, and
they are.
Better living and feeling awesome about waking up is like what I'm about. So anytime that we can help bring a little bit of that to the folks and just know that like we're all also still working on that. Like It's easy for me to talk about and then like I'm faced with it like all the time. And I have to be like, okay, Kat, remember that whole talk you gave?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Sometimes I'll rewatch my own videos and be like, oh, right. Ooh.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Good call.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Like, this was fucking dope. And I hope we can chat again soon.
Yeah, definitely. And when you come to California, you're going to have to let me know.
Oh, yeah. And I'm actually planning on getting my green card soon and moving there. So
perfect. Okay, done.
Plug whatever you want to plug right now to the camera.
If you want to check out Trip on This, it's on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Life with Kat Walsh is also on YouTube and all podcast platforms. I've been a little remiss with Life with Kat Walsh. I've just been so busy. But I'm going to get back to that. I've got some bigger plans around the merging the two, actually. So yeah, I've just been going under like a big rebrand. So you can find me at Life with Kat Walsh on Instagram. Currently on TikTok, it's Trip on This Pod. I do a lot of like little tutorial type videos that are good for people. If it's not Trip on This Pod, I'm in the process of changing it to Life with Kat Walsh also. So I'm trying to get everything under Life with Kat Walsh. But if you're listening and you're like, where is she? I'll send it all to Kira before this episode comes out. So.
Yeah. I'll put it down below for sure.
Awesome.
All right. Sweet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're amazing.